Good afternoon, or whatever respective time it is for you. European folks, or I see Andrew there, and the other side of the world. Uh, welcome to the first Esoterica live stream Q&A hangout of 2023. Which I have to admit, I don't know if other folks feel like this, but at some level, it doesn't feel like anything happened. I don't feel like it's a new year, and I don't think it's because I'm particularly keyed into another calendar. But I don't know. It just doesn't strike me as a new year. It doesn't feel nothing feels really fundamentally different. So, but at any rate, welcome and happy New Year to everyone who I'm just seeing or chatting with for the first time since the change of the new year. And yeah, also happy Friday the 13th. I think some of my favorite memories of Friday the 13th was reliably I could turn on the cable at my friend's house on Friday the 13th, and we could watch USA Up All Night. And it would either be like Rhonda Shear or Gilbert Godfrey of blessed memory. And they would always have like a Friday the 13th marathon. And we would just stay up all night watching Jason just massacre young people. And it was fantastic. It was absolutely fantastic. Completely inappropriate for like 10-year-olds to be watching Jason massacre people. But I think that the ones that they did, and the things that they did I think they edited them a lot, certainly to get rid of all of the magnificent 80s, TNA. Um, but I'm pretty sure they also like edited a lot of the violence. But yeah, I think my favorite one is the one where they like dig up Jason at the very beginning and he gets struck by lightning and like comes back like Frankenstein style. Um, that was quite a thing. But yeah, it was like Rhonda Share on Friday nights and Gilbert Godfrey on Saturday nights. I think that was great. But at any rate, happy Friday the 13th. I hope it is proving to be a lucky day for you, and if it is proving to be an unlucky day for you, I'm sorry. I don't know. I don't know what your standard amulet would be to sort that out. Um, but yeah, welcome. Now we're getting in team. Seeing the chat, we're getting the team. Team horror films. Um, yeah, I don't know. Michael Myers and Freddy and Jason and Pinhead, um, from all the various different people who were, I don't know, evil people. I don't know. I don't know if I have a team. I always thought Michael Myers was the most creepy, just because there was no seeming reason why he was doing what he was doing. I don't know. But also like Jason. Jason was like the underdog, right? He was like a disabled person who people like abandoned, and he's like vengeance. He's like pure unmitigated vengeance. Oh, he's like Nemesis. He's a very Greek, ancient Greek character in that way. So I always appreciated him. Now, of course, Freddy was very funny. I don't know. I don't know if I have an exact team of which ones I pick. But at any rate, well, welcome, folks. Welcome to another hangout. It's really great to be with you guys. It's been a great couple of 2 or 3 weeks in content production. Um, yeah, a lot of fun stuff. We had this huge Neoplatonism collaboration that's still going on between sort of this emergent cadre of religious studies, philosophy, esotericism people. That's just Angela and Zevi and Philip and other folks that we've been working with. So it's just been like an amazing collaboration over in terms of things like this Neoplatonism stuff, but also just it's so great just to know those folks and to work with them. But the Neoplatonism collab continues. If you haven't had the chance to check out Zevi's work on Neoplatonism and Kabbalah and the Renaissance, and Philip's new episode also on Neoplatonism and Islam. You absolutely got to go check those out. Those are excellent episodes, and those are fantastic. It's fantastic content. So I've been really, really appreciating working on that. Of course, my small contribution was to get into the stuff about Gnosticism, which I don't know. I don't know if folks feel the same way about this, but and I think I said this in the episode. There's so much emphasis given over to talking about how Christianity, early Christianity, so-called proto-Orthodox Christianity, was it attacked Gnosticism, but for whatever reason, we never talk about the facts about the fact that that Plotinus also came out against them, and that he knew them. He knew them personally. He talks about how they were people inside of his school. Maybe they were Valentinians or something. We don't know. or maybe Sethians. It seems like he's really keen in on attacking so-called this variant of Gnosticism that we call Platonism, Sethianism. But it's for whatever reason, and I know Jason, who also has a fantastic new channel. Jason, you should throw your the link to your channel in the chat if you don't mind. Jason Sobek, who's a great friend of the channel and just is producing a really cool new channel interviewing scholars on various topics in late antiquity. So folks should check his stuff out as well. But I think that one of the things that people just don't realize and don't talk about for whatever reason is again this Platinian Neoplatonic attack. And I think it's just a fascinating line of inquiry. And also I think that, I don't know, for folks who've ever read the Enneads, in the Enneads can be a slog, if I'm being honest. It's also the time where Plotinus as a person emerges, and not just Plotinus as sort of the saint that we see in the life of Porphyry, where he's ashamed to have a body and he's had these mystical visions and he's helping orphans or whatever, and that's all true of Plotinus, I suppose. But we kind of get his like salty side. We realize he's not just this sort of removed saint contemplating the one of the flight of the alone to the alone. He's also just kind of a prick. And he just calls people's names. He calls these poor Gnostics names and he makes fun of them. He really calls them slurs, some pretty nasty stuff. And I find that that's just really fascinating that we actually get a glimpse into Plotinus as sort of a snarky jackass. And not just the, again, the sort of saintly figure that we get from the life that we get in the life of Plotinus. So in Porphyry. At any rate, that was a fun episode to make, and I was really happy that one of the things that people expressed in the comments on that episode was that there was a lot of people saying, I didn't even know this was there. I've studied Gnosticism for 20 years and I had no idea this was just sitting there in the Enneads. And what was fascinating was that some people were really like, was this just discovered? Like, I've read the Enneads, I didn't even notice this. And I don't know. I've had people tell me that they've read the Enneads and for whatever reason they skipped it or missed it or didn't understand what it was, and which is totally reasonable. I mean, the Enneads is just a mess organizationally, and its writing style is terrible. But yeah, at any rate, it was a fun episode to do there. And what's fascinating is I also did this recent episode on some of the demonological and exorcism texts found at the Dead Sea Scrolls, and I saw there's a super chat question. I'll come back to it in just a moment. And one of the things that I did an episode on was this demonological and exorcistic literature from Qumran, from the Essenes. And it's interesting that episode performed really poorly. I mean, not that it really matters to me whether things perform really well or really poorly. I'm just always curious about why something performs well or performs poorly, or what your interests are, because you're my audience and you guys keep the lights on. So I'm curious about, when I think something I think would be pretty interesting. The Essenes are pretty interesting. The Dead Sea Scrolls are pretty interesting. It intersects really very much with early Christianity. Really gave us into a glimpse into an entire exorcistic tradition, the so-called Davidic exorcistic tradition that has vanished, doesn't exist anymore. It's completely extinct, completely replaced by Christianity at some level. And Judaism, of course, were basically abandoned exorcisms until the rise of the Dybbaks in the 16th century. But yeah, it's interesting that episode, I think, I'm looking at it now. Yeah, it's like the worst performing episode probably in 6 or 10 episodes. And maybe in 10 episodes, it may be the worst performing. So if anyone has any insights into why it performed poorly, let me know. I mean, I don't know. But so it goes. And folks probably have realized my tactic in a lot of episodes is sometimes I'll do something that's a little bit more clickbaity, like something that's a little bit more accessible. And then the next week after that, I'll do something that's very esoteric, like a very deep dive into something that I can bank on the fact that most people have never heard of any of this stuff. And the idea basically is try to, it's some level of gaming the algorithm so that you can get folks in who have a knowledge of some stuff, and then you can really kind of hit them with the really, really deep, the deeper stuff. And so it's, so in that way, it could be the case that exorcism and demonological stuff from the Dead Sea Scrolls was just too esoteric, and maybe people were like, nah, it's not that interesting. But um, what can you do? You can only make the content, and hopefully that people will watch it. And just ditto with sometimes when I make content about women, with the exception of the Mary Magdalene episode. Um, that one did really well, but the one I did on the American witch trials, aside from Salem, that one did very poorly. So I can almost always bank on the fact that if I make something about women, it will almost always do poorly. um, Except for with women, the women will watch it, which I'm very happy for, because the channel skews, YouTube and the channel in general skews very men heavy. So it's also great to be able to have content that will be attractive to women, because obviously they're an important part of the history of all this, and the present of all of this. So telling their story is a really important thing for me. And also, the fact that there were these witch trials in America aside from Salem, that story absolutely deserves to be told. And the victims that were murdered in state violence, absolutely their story deserves to be told. And those people deserve to have their name cleared, and their story told, and their name cleared, and their name ultimately exonerated. So, oh, Angela, hey. Folks, Angela Puka is in the chat. I'm sure many folks know her, but if you do not know, Dr. Angela Puka is a dear friend and another content creator. She creates amazing content over at Angela Symposium, especially if you're interested in things like paganism, shamanism, more contemporary stuff. Angela's works a lot more in more contemporary stuff than I do. So for folks who are in the chat or hearing this afterwards, if you're a fan of Esoterica, you're absolutely going to be a fan of Dr. Angela Puka's work. And speaking of women, absolutely go over to check her out. So yeah, I really appreciate Angela and the work that she does. Go check her content out, and and support her work. Got to support our women and gender nonconforming folks in the academic world, because they really have it a lot harder in a lot of ways than the dudes do. But yeah, it goes like that. That's also Jorge. I see you in the chat. My episode on Lady Anne Conway was an episode that didn't do well, but it was one of my favorite episodes to make. She's just such an important character in the history of so much, like the connection between Kabbalah and Quakerism, and like the Cambridge Platonists, like all of that stuff. Really, she is the reason why all that came together at some level, and the reason at some level why Kabbalah ended up in North America at the very beginning. And that is just so important to me, that she's like this central node and a brilliant philosopher on her own. She has this really great book that she published, or that was published after she died, sadly, and by von Helmont. And it's one of these books that I think most, even people who are pretty into esotericism, they've never heard of this book. They've never heard of Lady Anne Conway. And it's absolutely, she's just a wonderful, important character in the history of Western esotericism. But again, she just kind of goes water under the bridge, unfortunately, and I think it's really a pity, and it deeply destroys our understanding of how Western esotericism developed when we leave those voices out. And I think that's it's not just like a thing that I want to do because I'm trying to follow some kind of stupid woke agenda or whatever. It's like, this is the history, folks. Like, either we're going to do the history or we're not going to do the history. And if we're going to do the history, part of what a channel like Esoterica is going to have to do is go to the stuff that no one else has touched for whatever reason, and then get that available and get it out front and center. Because how many episodes are there on Freemasonry on the internet about something? There's 1,000 episodes about Freemasonry. There's 1,000 episodes about Aleister Crowley. There's 1,000 episodes about I don't know, about Anton LaVey and modern Satanism. That there's just a lot already out there. This channel's mandate at some level is to go not to the stuff that's already been well trod. It's to go to the stuff that I think is not getting any attention or very little attention, and really bringing it to the forefront, and showing that it deserves to be at the forefront, because it's been at the back burner for so long, and it's a really core part of understanding what Western esotericism is. And so I think that that's just the task of a historian. It doesn't really matter, that that the character is obscure. That's exactly why this channel exists, is in order to make that more apparent. And so that's, again, that's the mandate of the channel at some level, at least a mandate I've given myself. And that's why I want to deep dive into those things. And, some of those episodes are just not going to perform well. And that's just you know, that's the price you pay for having a channel called Esoterica. You shore that up with all the episodes about Solomonic magic that everyone seems to love for whatever reason. But I have to say that for me at least, they're the intellectually least interesting episodes. But they're always the one that they're the ones that keep the lights on. And so far be it for me to look down my nose at doing them. But I will say that intellectually, they're often the least interesting. Um, just like, getting demons to do stuff for you. I'm like, it's historically cute, but it's not that interesting in terms of, it's intellectually not that stimulating for me. But let me scroll back up and grab that super chat, super question, because I know I saw it up there. I don't want to forget it. And folks, again, I'll get to all of the any and all of the super chats or super comments, and I'll also try to get to as many non ones as I can, because I don't want it ever be the case that anyone feels like they have to give money to get a question answered. I really want to make sure that I answer the ones that folks pay me to, but also I want to treat the others as importantly as I possibly can, because what I don't want is for again, Esoterica to become a thing where it caters only to people able to throw down money. I think that's not what I want to do. So V Scott, thank you. Is there any evidence that the Essenes are the predecessors to mystical Judaism? 2, were there other Jewish miracle workers you mentioned in the Galilee Essenes, or part of other Jewish sects? So the first answer is probably not. No, I think that there's very little evidence that the Essenes were the predecessors to mystical Judaism. Assuming that the people at Qumran who left the sectarian documents there are the same people as the Essenes. So let's assuming that is case, and I think most scholars think that it is. Of course, there's always a range of scholarship about this, but it is what the data seems to indicate is that with the exception of the Damascus document, right, which shows that maybe something got out and maybe got copied, my general assumption is that the people that lived at Qumran were massacred during the Great Revolt. I tend to believe that for 2 reasons. One, we found their scrolls. Those were very important documents to those people, and they would not have left them there. They would have come back for them. They would have taken them with them. You just don't leave. I mean, again, scribal activity, they were about it, and they would not have just left that stuff there. Secondly, there's a mention in Josephus, and again, we should take Josephus for whatever we take him as, that they did go out to battle, and that we even know the name of one of their strategos, a general that led them. And they did engage the Romans in a couple battles and apparently were massacred. And if that's true, and I have every reason to believe that it is, what I think probably happened there was that they thought that they were going to go out to battle and that the war scroll was going to happen, that they were going to go out to battle, they were going to get massacred, and at the very last minute, the Messiah was going to come and they were going to fix everything. And I think they got massacred down to the last man, and that was the end of it. I think some people may have escaped, but I think the Essenes were basically categorically wiped out in the Great Revolt. So no, I don't think they had much impact. In fact, they were a monastic community. I don't think that they were interested in trying to impact the outside world. They were mostly interested in trying to maintain their own purity, waiting for the world to come to an end, so that they could be restored back to their position of power in the way they imagine the world. So that I think the Essenes didn't have much of an impact because 1, they didn't want to, and 2, they were all massacred. And so were there other Jewish miracle workers that you mentioned in the Galilee? None of those were Essenes. No, they were Chanina ben Dosa and Choni the Circle Maker, Jesus. Yeah, I don't think any of those guys were Essenes. They don't seem to put the kind of emphasis that the Essenes had, the kind of things, right? The Essenes were the Qumran community, assuming that they were the Essenes that Josephus mentions. Um, the extreme ritual concerns and the monastic lifestyle that the Essenes seem to have had, neither Jesus nor Choni nor Chanina Bendosa, none of those seem to have. So, and we don't have much in the way of Josephus or any other historian mentioning particular Essenes doing miracle work. Because again, they were mostly just sort of out by themselves, waiting for the world to come to an end, I think. And so no, I don't think so. I don't think so. All right. Grab a couple other ones that come in, then I'll try to start grabbing some from the crowd. Thank you. Thank you all, folks. Is it true that the Toth tablet was found in the pyramids and holds esoteric knowledge? To my knowledge, no Toth tablet has ever been found in the pyramids. In fact, I don't think any tablets are found in the pyramids at all. The pyramids do contain inscriptions, but they're mostly magical inscriptions. They're called the pyramid texts. You can find them online. They're mostly text for ensuring the revivification of the pharaonic soul. And protecting him in his journey to the afterlife. But no, there's no Toth tablet found in the pyramids to my knowledge. And you had to specify which pyramid because there are a bunch in Egypt and Nubia. But to my knowledge, no, the pyramids do not contain a Toth text. Mostly what we have there is magical text referred to as the pyramid literature, which is neat. It is neat, but it's not related to Toth. Thank you for the super sticker. I appreciate that. Do you see any similarities between the persons of the Trinity and the Spheroid? Yes. Yes, and in fact, probably self-consciously so. Um, so let's think about this, right? Basically, what we're trying to do at some level is, and it's a task of any kind of Neoplatonist kind of metaphysics, um, although there's a heavy dose of Stoicism in here too, is that you're trying to get out of the inner logic of a transcendent God back to a finite universe. And whether it's Neoplatonism or Trinitarianism or the Spheroid for that matter, um, you're going to need some kind of principle to mediate between the infinitely removed one or father and the immanence of the world. And the only way to do that philosophically is to add more entities. Now, Plotinus added 3. Ultimately, the Kabbalists will add 10. There's lots of number. Proclus adds a whole lot more, all the Henads and stuff. But that's kind of what you have to do to make it work. And so that's the first thing, is just a philosophical point about that. The second point that's worth mentioning is that the writers of the Zohar know about Christianity. They're living in medieval Spain. They're living in a world super saturated with Christianity. They're living in a world in which the Marian cult is really exploding for the first time. And there's, at some level, and also the Jews are converting in mass to Christianity under extreme pressure. I mean, we're talking about the late 13th century. The Reconquista is nearing completion. And you're in a situation where there is enormous pressure on the Jewish communities to convert to Christianity. And many of them were. I mean, in fact, many of the Maimonideans were accused of converting because basically they thought it was all just metaphors. And what's the difference in playing in a synagogue and playing in a church if you're really just worshiping some version of the Aristotelian God? Why risk everything to remain Jewish when you can, basically switch teams and still believe in more or less the same Aristotelian God, and you can get land and title and deeds and be safe and all kinds of things until the Inquisition shows up, of course. But the idea, I think, in the Zohar, where the Sphirot are being really developed, is that at some level they're an answer to the Trinity. Right? Anything you can do, I can do better. You got 3, we got 10. In fact, that was a criticism of the Sphirot by the Jewish community. They're like, how the Christians were bad enough with 3, and now you guys come out with 10. It's it's even worse. It's even worse idolatry. That criticism didn't stick. But I think the argument here, right, is that at some level the Zohar is self-conscious of the existence of the Trinity, and it wants to do it, 7 better. And the upper relationship between Keter, Bina, and Chokhmah, right? The upper relationship between those top 3 um, is really, at some level, is really thought to be a kind of Trinity, and there are very carefully worded. Should I say carefully worded? There are very intentionally laid elements in the Zohar where it's very clear that the writers of the Zohar are trying to outdo the Trinity. They're saying, "Yeah, we have a Trinity too, and our Trinity is better than yours. Yeah, you have the Virgin Mary, but yeah, we have the Shekinah, right? You have Jesus, but we have the Yanuka, the Messianic child." And that's a self-conscious decision on the part of the writers of the Zohar, as part of their kind of polemic, a kind of polemic against the Christianity that they're facing up against, and the Christianity to which the Jewish community was losing converts. Now, um, did the Zohar effectively work to convince people not to convert? I don't think so. I think that anyone who had access to it would be the kind of people that would never have converted anyway. The Maimonideans are never going to be convinced by the Zohar. Um, it's just not a text that's ever going to convince them. But um, the people for whom the more conservative people who really wanted to maintain a non-Maimonidean, much more Talmudic and mythical approach, that the Zohar was going to be did prove very attractive, and that Trinitarian logic that was in there was interesting to them. But not only would it be interesting to them, but fast forward a couple hundred years to people like Pico della Mirandola, he's also going to see the Trinity in there. And it's going to be the impetus to go into the Zohar to find the Trinity and things like Christianity, that in order to prove the truth of Christianity, that are really going to motivate Christian Kabbalah to emerge in the first place. And so the emergence of Christian Kabbalah is, hilariously, because history is just a complete dumpster fire, Pico della Mirandola believed the claims of the Kabbalists that the Kabbalah and the Zohar had come all the way back to Moses, and because they had put the Trinity in there in the 13th century, Pico della Miranda, believed that the Trinity was actually encoded there all along, all the way back to Moses' revelation via God, and therefore the Kabbalah and the Zohar needed to be reintroduced into Christendom as part of his sort of syncretistic plan to generate a kind of reformed Christianity. So it has this long, tortured history. When you ask a question like, what's the relationship of the Trinity and the Spheroid, you have a pretty simple philosophical answer, but then you have this other much more tortured answer coming out of the history of the development of the Zohar, the social and cultural religious conditions in which the Zohar was produced, the kind of polemics the Zohar engages in over and against Christianity, the way that it sort of manipulates Christian ideas in order to kind of like poke fun at them, but also like appropriate them in some ways. And then the claims it makes about itself, about it being really, really ancient, and how people like Pico della Mirandola and Johannes Reuchlin and other people, John Dee, how they believe those claims, and then introduced Kabbalah into the Christian world, and how that eventually, really populated itself through the development of Western esotericism. It's great. And this is why my job is fantastic, because that is a hilariously interesting story that, again, to untangle all the parts of it is really fascinating. And you can get into the metaphysics of it, you can get in the history of it, and you get in the text of it, like Zevi and I have been doing a Secrets of Unity, but there's a lot going on there. So anyway, it's a long, roundabout, tortured way of answering your question. So I hope that was worth $5. Thank you. Appreciate you supporting the channel. All right. I know that there's a lot more in here. Let me try to get to some others. Do you think if Porphyry met up with Longinus with Plotinus' full works, it would refine our understanding of Plotinus and especially Platonism? What do I think about that? I mean, probably not. I don't think so. I mean, and I guess I say not because whatever Plotinus was doing wasn't Platonism ipso facto. It was a kind of very particular kind of Platonism that was being developed primarily by Plotinus, and really developing, sort of emerging out of Middle Platonism. So Yeah, I mean, I guess my short answer is probably no. I don't think that, it's hard to answer historical counterfactuals like that. But no, probably not. Probably not. I mean, I think that um, it's far more the case that we can elucidate, in my opinion, we can elucidate Plotinus far better by reading the people who came before him, which we don't. And now we don't because we can't, because a lot of their works are lost. But when people often will want to understand Plotinus by going and reading Iamblichus and Proclus and Damascus or whatever, and I think that's wrong-headed. I think that, again, we should go read the people in Egypt that he was reading. We should go read Numenius and people like Theodorus of Gaza or whatever. That go read these kinds of people, what we now call the Middle Platonists. I think that they're a much better a much better window into Platonism, Neoplatonism, as much as it's a neo. Um, and I think that's a far better way of understanding where he comes from. It's a pity we've lost a lot of that stuff, unfortunately. We don't have anything of Monius Sakis or anything like that. But yeah. So at any rate, yeah, I don't think so. I think so. This is just the one I want to grab because I see it on the screen. I have it downstairs. I have not had the chance to do anything other than flip through it. But I'm giving a 2-part lecture in the summer on the Tree of Life. Basically, I'm giving a 2-part philosophical lecture talking about the bridge between the finite and the infinite, and I'll be talking about it in lots of philosophical traditions. So it's like, and of course, the Kabbalistic one will feature largely. So I'm looking forward to checking it out, but I have not had the chance to check it out yet. It's a great book. It's a little expensive, but I will say that it's about $100. But I will say that it is pretty well worth it. It is an amazingly well put together book, and it's sort of like a coffee table book pretending to be an academic book, but it's also an academic book trying to be a coffee table book, and it really is worth it. The foldouts and stuff are really immaculate. So if folks haven't had the chance to take a look at that, take a look at it. If you're interested in the Spheroid, it's really well worth it. I'll come back to it later. Actually, I may want to interview him about it because it's really just a fascinating the history of the Illinote, especially the Shabbatian Illinote. There are a couple of Shabbatian ones, and I'm sure they're in the book. I haven't looked through it yet, but the Shabbatian ones are really fascinating. But all the stuff that goes on in the Tehiru that are unique to Nathan of Gaza's theology, which are really fascinating. I mean, Nathan of Gaza's. And I'd be curious to see when the Illinote were developed, and if they look like the kind of theory he gives early on in the Treatise on the Dragons, or much later on in the Sefer Berea, because those systems are quite different. That's one of the things that Gershom Scholem kind of makes a mistake about. You can't correct Gershom Scholem because you get struck down by the Gershom Scholem God. But if you read Gershom Scholem's book on Shabbatai Tzvi, especially his analysis of the treatise of the dragons, one of the things that I think he makes a mistake about is he sort of conflates the theology of the Sefer Berea and the Derushalayim, and he kind of conflates what goes on there, because it's pretty clear that later on Nathan of Gaza changes his mind about what's going on at the very beginning of creation, and if you read them, Scholem kind of blurs them together. He produces a more synthetic version that kind of harmonizes both of them. But it's pretty clear to me, at least, that Nathan of Gaza's theology had evolved, and of course the Sefer Berea is the much more mature position, and it was written and published after Shabbatai's apostasy. So anyway, sideways point. All right. Oh, this is a great question. Was Audius Minutius a converso? So folks may know this. Audius Minutius was, was he the most important printer in Venice? Probably. I mean, he's maybe the most important Italian printer, one of them. He printed all kinds of classical works, and they're beautifully printed. I mean, if you get the chance to ever handle a work printed by Minutius, they're lovely. He printed the famous Dreams of Polyphily, blah blah blah, the crazy book that Polyphily, whatever, which is just a psychedelic, wonderful piece of Renaissance literature. But to answer your question, was he converso? I've never heard that he was a converso. Um, I've never heard that. So I've never heard that he was. Um, but wouldn't be surprising if he were. But I never heard that he was a converso. So I'd be proud to own him if he could claim that he was Jewish, even if he was a converso. I'd love to have him on our team. He produced some of the most beautiful books, classical texts. They're just beautiful, absolutely beautiful printing. All right, a couple more down here. Any recommended readings on any affordable books on the Zohar? I guess it depends on what you mean by affordable. Um, I mean, Art Green's little introduction to the Zohar is really accessible and really good. I mean, there's a lot of sort of proto versions of the Pritzker that were printed before the Pritzker was printed that Daniel Matt had produced. All those are great. They're slim little volumes, but they at least give you a Bissell Zohar, a little taste of Zohar. So those are all good. Um, um, Malila Eshet, her book on the Partsufim is a little expensive, but it's the best analysis of the most complex and most difficult parts of the Zohar, the Idrot and the Sifra Ditzniuta. Those parts are the most puzzling sections and maybe all the Western esotericism. Um, but she's done just a amazing job analyzing those. But those texts are a little expensive. Zohar literature, there's a text on Zohar poetics, but it's kind of expensive. I mean, unfortunately, it's just the literature is pretty arcane, and so it's academic publishing by Oxford and stuff, and so unsurprising, it's going to get costly really quick. Um, I would say that if you want to start studying the Zohar, and I think I said this in one of my early videos on studying the Zohar, if you want to start studying the Zohar, what I would recommend doing is go to the volume that contains, and I can't remember which volume it is. I can look it up if you want. Go to the volume that contains what is called the Midrash Hana'ilam. Midrash Hana'ilam, or the hidden Midrash, is the earliest strata of the Zohar. The Zohar was composed over a course of a couple decades, and as it progresses, it gets more and more and more esoteric, as you might imagine. But the first stratum of the Zohar is this Midrash Hana'ilam, and it's the most accessible. If you've never studied the Zohar and you want to study it for the first time, that's the best text to study in the Zohar because it's the least crazy. Now, the only downside of that is just as a warning, there's very little stuff in there about the Spheroid. Most of it's about the soul and the afterlife and some mystical, musings like that. But there's not much in there about the Spheroid, probably because the idea hasn't really fully developed in the Zoharic circles yet, even though it already appears in a kind of proto way in the Sefer Bahir. So if you're going to buy a volume of the Pritzker, right? If you want to go buy a volume of the Pritzker and because you just want to try one, I would not buy volume one. Volume one contains the introduction to the Zohar, which is a beast of a text. Do not buy that one. I would buy the one that contains Midrash Hana'ilam, and I don't know which volume it is. I can look it up. But that would be the one that I would pick up if you're going to buy one, because they're kind of expensive. But if you get just one volume of the Pritzker Zohar, I would start with that one. And once you feel like you've studied that one enough, then go to the other sections of the Zohar, like the Anuka that Zevi and I have started studying together, which is a great text. All right, one more super thanks down here. Yeah, thank you, Adam, for the super sticker. Yeah, thank you as well, Bether, like a zephyr. Thank you. Yeah, from Adam. Thank you guys so much for the super stickers. This is great. I really, really appreciate this. All right. Why are horns associated with satanic, pagan, evil imagery? Are there dietary restrictions on eating horned animals in various religious texts? There's not in Judaism. In fact, a lot of horned animals that you can eat in Judaism that are kosher. I think that the connection probably comes from Pan. I think that a lot of the imagery comes out of a relationship to Pan, like he's kind of goat-like, as satyr-like creatures. A lot of early demons. If you look at a lot of early demons, by the way, they're kind of all over the place in how they look, especially in manuscripts and early printed works. Um, I mean, the ones like, for instance, in uh, if you look in Von Eyck and look at all the demons in there, man, it's like crazy a lot of different kind of demons. Some of them don't have heads; they have big mouths in their chest or whatever. Um, like something from Guillermo del Toro or whatever. But I think that what ends up happening is that Pan and Dionysus become associated with sin, and I think that ultimately what ends up happening is that that kind of stuff gets translated over to demonic entities more generally. So I think that most of the time that we're seeing, standard demonic entities like you see in, I don't know, Doom, with the kind of goat-headed goat, kind of human-bodied but goat-bodied combination. I think that's probably Pan imagery being transferred over into demonic imagery more generally. But the idea of horned beings being evil, nothing inherently evil about, at least in Jewish mythology, nothing inherently evil about horned beings. Or there's a goat for Azazel, but but there's also a goat for Yahweh. So they're both sacrificed. So it's not like that. So and also the whole, I'm seeing in the chat the stuff about the horned Moses. This comes from a funny translation error in the Hebrew Bible where they mistranslate the radiance coming from Moses' face in Hebrew as horns, cornu, uh, in Latin. And there's this weird idea that Moses had horns, and you see horns on his David's depiction of him. Michelangelo's depiction of him shows him horned, and there's a lot of imagery of Moses with horns. So in that way, it kind of picks up from there. I don't think it is connected to anti-Semitism in any kind of way, although you do hear it sometimes that the Jews have horns. But I think that's probably not, strictly speaking, like that Jews had horns and therefore demons have horns. I think it was demons have horns and therefore Jews got horns by association somehow. Um, but yeah, it'd be interesting to track out the entire history of how demons get depicted. Because if you look at really early literature like Saint Anthony and stuff, the demons don't look much different than just regular people, when they're described at least. And that's true of angels too. In fact, the angels look very much like people. In fact, every time they show up, and many times in the Hebrew Bible, um, they don't even know they're not people. Abraham doesn't know. Abraham doesn't know that he's encountering angels. Now I know what you're saying. What about the biblically accurate angels, like the Ophanim or whatever? Those aren't angels. Um, it's one of the things I'm going to make an episode about at some point. Is that how biblically accurate angels aren't biblically accurate, because the things that they're telling you are angels, like the Ophanim, like the creatures with the wheels and the eyes, those aren't angels. They're Ophanim. They're a whole different species of members of the divine council. And so they have nothing to do with angels. The angels are a very specific kind of entity, and they have a very specific job. Like, everything in the Hebrew Bible like that is very engineered to do a job, and the Ophanim have a job too. They're wheels. They're not angels. They're wheels, and they're the wheels of God's divine chariot. So yeah, at some point I'm gonna make an episode like that. But I hate making like nitpicky episodes like that, like to be the Reddit actually guy. I don't want to do that, and I don't want to do episodes where I'm just critiquing other material, because I don't think that no one really, um, learns from that kind of like gotcha material. But I feel like the biblically accurate angel stuff has gotten so popular that it's actually like it was meant to create it was meant to fix a misconception, and it's now led to another misconception. um in that way, it's sort of like another correction to a corrective. um yeah, another correction to correction to a corrective. But I guess how we lurch to Jerusalem to be born. We try to find the truth of these things, and we do it like that. So um, that's a great question. What do you think of Eliana Safe's work on Islamic mysticism? I would say that Eliana Safe is the person who's doing the best work on that topic. Alhamdulillah for her and her scholarship. She's currently in Amsterdam. But yeah, her work is absolutely wonderful. I only wish that Palgrave would kind of knock the price off of her book, because her book on is the Islamic influences on Western esotericism, because again, it's one of these really important correctives that it's corrective. It's a corrective in two senses. One, it just tells us that there's much more of a direct impact of Islamic material into Western esotericism. That's important, not to deny it, but it also begins to unravel the concept of Western. What is Western? Where does Western begin and end? Is a Persian philosopher, is a Persian esotericist living in a Baghdad? Is he Western? Like, where is the West, and where does West begin and end? When you think about Jabir ibn Hayyan, the alleged circle of Ismaili alchemists that really propelled alchemy into the Middle Ages, and really completely transformed a great deal of the alchemy that they had inherited from Alexandria, the Alexandrian situation. There's no history of alchemy that doesn't include them. There's incredibly important. And the question is, if we're going to include them, are they Western? And what does Western mean on a globe anyway? Like this. Now, I'm not. I don't want to go so far as say that it has no analytic ability at all. But we have to question these. You have to question categories, folks. Categories are sometimes useful, but they're never true. Categories are just useful things that we use to try to help us get a handle on things. But the moment that we begin to really get into them, all of them fall apart, because, at least from my poor old nominalist mind, none of them are real, right? None of them are real. They're just constructs that we use to group knowledge in a way that helps us to understand things. But the more that we drill down into them, the more they evaporate, right? The more you increase your resolution, the more those categories break down. They only work at a pretty low resolution. And so, to use resolution in the sense that we use in philosophy of science when it comes to theories. And so, I think that one of the great things about Eliana Safe's work, one of the great things among many things about her work, is that it does a lot of the work of beginning to take these to take those things apart. But yeah, I mean, do I want to give up on Western? Not really, because I do think that we could draw a line. Actually, I do think that there was a place where, at some level, cross-cultural exchange was very minimal. Not to probably put that much further east, probably there, right at the border of what is now Pakistan. I think that there's very little evidence of much cross-cultural transfer, much less. Just because there's mountains in the way, it's really difficult to get a bunch of stuff over there. So I think that's where, and it wasn't because they didn't try. Plotinus tried. Plotinus actively tried to go on Gordian's hike out east to go learn from the Indian philosophers and gymnosophists, but he never made it. And I think he didn't make it just because it's hard. It's a long journey, and it's super hard in that way. But I don't think there was much cross-cultural exchange. Very, very little, except for Gandharan art and stuff like that. All right. Did I see the modern hermeticist lurking in the chat? There he is, Dana Trell. Islamic world's part of the Western world. There you go. Problem solved. I kind of agree. I largely agree. I just think of like the Western world, including that entire block, all the way to Persia, all the way to the Maghreb, all the way north to Iceland. I just think of that as being the Western world. I think that that's my solution to it too. At some level, it's not that we need to dispense with the category. I mean, the category is useful insofar as it is. It's just I think we need to make the category a lot bigger. That it shouldn't be that Western shouldn't be Eurocentric. And I think that's a relatively elegant solution to the problem. Or maybe it's not elegant. Maybe it's really blunt, actually. But at any rate, Dan, good to see you. Folks, Dan Trail, the Modern Hermeticist. If you're not checking out his content, you need to go over to his channel. Dan is doing. He's really going down into the esoteric minds, as we call them. And one of the things that's really great about Dan's channel is he's producing really great audiobooks on a lot of these classical texts. And I mean, Dan has a great philosophy about this, and I really appreciate it. Is that one of the things that esotericists need to be doing is reading primary texts. In fact, we should be reading them as best we can in their original languages. And what Dan's doing is very heroic work of taking a lot of these classical texts with people like Thomas Taylor, making them available, along with doing other things as well on his channel. Dan and I worked together on some great projects. Dan, I appreciate your work. And folks, if you haven't gone over to check out with Danatrell, the Modern Hermeticist, please go check his channel out and subscribe, support his work. I appreciate it. Appreciate you, Dan. Let's work on something together soon. I'd like to do another commentary or some kind of work together. Always appreciate working with you, man. It's always a lot of fun. All right, folks, I'm just going to kind of start grab bagging some questions. And again, I really apologize if I don't get to your question. But I'm going to kind of scroll up and just sort of like rapid fire some of these questions and see if I can get to them quickly because I want to be on here about an hour and a half. And I want to grab some other questions if I can. So let me just scroll through really quickly, folks, and try to get to some of these questions. So how familiar are we with the teacher of righteousness and then Maccabean lapse and the high priest? I mean, as familiar as like, someone who's kind of has amateurish knowledge of the Dead Sea Scrolls. We don't know who they were. There's some guesses about who the teacher of righteousness was. It's interesting that none of the writers mention there being a sort of important teacher kicked out. Like whatever really made the Essenes angry was a minor instance, apparently, in the royal history of the Maccabees and the Hasmoneans or whatever. So it's interesting that whatever was a really big deal to them was not a big deal to anyone else. And we even know of other people getting kicked out, like Onias III, right? He gets kicked out and just he's like, I'll take my ball and play elsewhere. He goes to Alexandria and builds a rival temple, which is super fascinating. So we know a lot more we know that there are other people that got ejected for political reasons, not for really theological reasons. But we don't know about the teacher of righteousness and exactly who that was and why they were kicked out. Assuming they were. I mean, who knows? For all we know, they just made this stuff up. But it is an interesting question, but I don't have a strong opinion or even knowledge about who they think it might have been. All right. I don't have an opinion about this. Yeah, this is a practical question. I'm not since I'm not a practitioner, it's not for me to really have an opinion about mixing and matching symbols. I mean, I will tell you that historically, that's the rule. I mean, that is how cultural diffusion works. Is that one culture's magic brushes up against other culture's magic, and they absorb to some degree each other's techniques. That's true of religion in general, magic specifically. But I don't have an opinion about which one mixes better. I just feel like anyone who tells you that there is a pure system of magic that has no contact with anything from any other traditions is deluded or lying or both. So, but yeah, I don't have an opinion about how you should mix and match. All right, keep down. Do you think there's a correlation between the return of the flat Earth and the gods that were around at the time of the ancients thinking the Earth was flat? The ancients didn't think the Earth was flat. I mean, some people did, but almost all learned people in the Hellenistic world knew the Earth was round. Not just that they knew the world was round; they knew how round it was. They knew basically the exact parameters because they knew trigonometry. They had, whatever is what's his name? I think it's slipped my mind now. He measured the obelisks, right? And you got the shadow of them at several different points down at different cataracts of the Nile and did the trig and figured out. And I think he was right within a couple degrees. So ancient people, including medieval people, did not think the world was flat. And I say ancient people, I mean Hellenistic people who were educated and medieval people who were educated. The ancient Israelites probably thought the world was flat, like a flat disc supported on pillars with a firmament above it. But anyone who had some basic math and basic physics, they figured out the Earth was round pretty quickly. Ancient people weren't stupid. Modern people are stupid. And that's why we have modern stupid people who think the world is flat. Ancient people, I mean, again, you could have gone back into the ancient world and Alexandrian scholars would just laugh at us. They're like, oh, wow, you guys are 2,000 years on us and you're still producing morons on the internet think the world's flat. All right. I love those guys trying to prove the world's flat and they always prove it's round. That's great. Um, all right, let me keep scrolling down and all right, so this is an interesting question of the Scarlet Woman of Thelema. I probably wouldn't do this episode. I bet this is much more up Dr. Angela Puka's alley. But yeah, I think she's had Manon White. I think Manon, her last name is White. Manon White is a scholar of women in Thelema, and she's done some work on the issue of Scarlet Women. There's a whole book about it. I've not read it because I don't do much work in contemporary stuff or Thelema. I say that, but next week's episode is going to be about the bornless ritual, the Akaphalos ritual. So I say that, but then of course I'm going to completely lie and do an episode that's going to be at least somewhat dealing with Liber Samach. So, but no, I probably wouldn't do an episode on that. But I bet Angela might. Um, bet Angela might. It's killing me that I cannot remember the name of the guy that figured out the the world was round. That's so embarrassing. Um, yeah, I keep wanting to say it's Xenocrates, but it's not Xenocrates. I can't remember. Someone in the chat will know. Um, all right. Then I want to say Hegesippus, but I know that's not either because he was a church historian. It's funny when these names get blended in your head and you can't quite tease them out when you need to. They all get kind of muddled together. All right. Oh, this is one I missed. Sorry. Um, yeah, thank you for the for the super thanks. Yeah, if you're a metalhead, you should check out our merch. I had some of the shirts on. I should be wearing my shirt actually. I finally got my Esoterica shirt. But we have Esoterica shirts that are done like black metal style, which I think was kind of clever. Maybe I'm completely just in my own head and by what the aesthetics I like, but they're kind of cool Esoterica black metal shirts. All right. It's funny. Someone mentioned modern Shabbatians. Yeah, apparently there's like a clique of like modern Shabbatians that really hate esoterica for whatever reason. I don't know what exactly I've done to make them so angry, but I think they just like there's a couple of these like edgy, I don't know, incel modern Shabbatians that just really hate religious studies YouTube for whatever reason. And I've heard they're active on, I don't know, 4chan or Twitter or wherever these people hide. Um, but yeah, apparently they really hate esoteric and they really hate religious studies YouTube. I'm assuming they know the truth to all this stuff, so you guys should go learn from them. Um, I will politely pass. Um, aren't the Kardashians Donme from Turkey? I thought they were Armenians, not Turks. I could be wrong. I think the Kardashians are Armenians. I don't think that they're Donme. That would be so boss though if the Kardashians were actually secretly Donme and they were secretly spreading like Shabbatianism via their like fashion. Um, that would be amazing. That needs to be a thing. Um, there's all these stupid conspiracy theories about how there are all these Frankists hiding everywhere in the Vatican or the Saudis or something. This like um, uh, insidiously stupid David Icke stuff. Um, these secret Frankists are doing and everything. Which, by the way, people think I'm a secret Frankist, which is hilarious. Um, and it's stuff like that. But it would be really great if there really were secret Donme Frankists, Shabbatians, but they really were just like the Kardashians and people like that. That would be that would be much better. I would love that. um, that would be much better. Um, Elaborate on Agrippa's use of soul of the world and how the mechanics fit into his worldview. He's a Neoplatonist of a certain kind. I mean, it's just Agrippa's idea of the soul of the world is basically him combining some degree of Neoplatonism with Christianity. He kind of mixes it together a little bit with the Trinity, but basically, if you understand your Neoplatonism, it's the upper and lower registers of the third emanation, and that's how basically he combines at some level Trinitarianism and Neoplatonism into one system, and that's basically what the soul of the world is. So it's sort of, again, the hybridized version of of Agrippa's system. Yes, I will be making episodes on Iamblichus and De Mysteris. Yeah, I will be doing it. I don't know when I'll be doing it, but at some point. Um, it's quite a thing to bite off. But now that I've dipped my toe a little bit into Plotinus and his world, yeah, I do want to come back to uh, to Iamblichus and his De Mysteris. Although, again, Angela talked about De Mysteris just a couple episodes ago. So if you haven't had the chance to check out Dr. Puka's episode on the differences between Plotinus and Iamblichus on theurgy, make sure to check those out. All right. Have you any bibliographic suggestion on Jewish poetry of the Middle Ages? No, I don't know much about Jewish poetry in the Middle Ages, like piyuts and stuff like that. I mean, you can see a lot of those in Sidurim, like for the Machzorim, for like the high holidays. You can see some of those piyuts, but I don't know much about Jewish poetry in the Middle Ages more generally. So, sorry, John Coltrane's Ethic. I don't know much about that. I do have a collection of medieval Jewish sermons from the high holidays, which are great because they're just condemning people, like to their face, like you're all sinners and you deserve that God will kill us all. And I always tell my partner, who's a rabbi, she's, like every rabbi in the high holidays, she's like freaking out about what to give her high holiday sermons, because that's like, like I think it's like Christians who only come on Easter and Christmas or whatever. There's tons of Jews that only come on the high holidays, and the sermon you give on the high holidays is like kind of what they get. And so it's really important to get it right. And I always tell her jokingly, of course, that she should actually just start her sermon using one of those medieval sermons and just freak everybody out. Um, and then actually go to her real sermon, but she never does that because she's actually a sane person. But I think it would be funny just the same. It'd be funny just the same. Maybe some Essenes became Therapeutai. Probably not. The Therapeutai were there probably before the Essenes, at least to some degree. And they're way over in Alexandria. They're way over in Alexandria. And they seem to be different. I mean, Philo seems to indicate that they're similarly monastic, but and there's a lot of monastics out there at that time. But yeah, I don't think that I think the Essenes and the Therapeutai were different groups. That answers this one too, I think. No, there's no evidence of a connection. I mean, you don't have any evidence of Therapeutai, frankly, archaeologically speaking. We have good evidence of the Essenes archaeologically. Again, assuming that the Qumran community, the Essene community, is the same stuff, same people. But yeah, I don't think we have any connection at all. And I think we don't even know about the Therapeutai outside of Philo. I don't think anyone else mentions them. I think it's uniquely him that mentions them. I don't think they get mentioned by Josephus. So, can you speak on the idea the 12 tribes of Judah represent the 12 zodiac signs? I mean, there aren't 12 tribes of Judah. They're the 12 tribes of Israel. And Philo says this. Philo says that although he's very skeptical of astrology, actually, Philo doesn't have a lot of positive things to say about astrology. But he does say that the Choshen, the Turim, the breastplate of the high priest, that the jewels in that represent the 12 zodiacal signs. So, and we know that there were lots of Jews interested in astrology. In fact, the Beit Alpha synagogue, which was built a few centuries later than that, it's beautiful. It has a giant zodiac wheel right there in the middle of the synagogue. It's very beautiful, very worth seeing. So that's although Judaism has always had a very ambivalent relationship with astrology. If you want to hear a long talk about that, you should go check out the episode I did with Chris Brennan on his astrology podcast. I mean, really great. Chris Brennan's a great guy. And we talked at length, hours, I think 3 hours or something, about the complicated relationship of Judaism and astrology. All right, I know there's some supers that have come through. Let me grab those. Great. I'm seeing some folks going over to Dr. Atrell's channel and subscribed Um, your life is better for it. Well, Constellation Pegasus. Hey, recognize you from um, two other great channels: the Gnostic Informant and Myth Vision. Both great channels, also worth checking out. So, Rabbi said today, Kabbalah is the highest form of Torah in Jewish culture you can do. Some rabbis think that. If Kabbalah starts in the 13th century, then God inspired those texts then. Weird to think about that. Well, that's not what Orthodox people believe. No, let's draw two distinctions here. There are Orthodox people who accept the legitimacy of the Kabbalah as being legitimately ancient. That is to say, they do believe that the Kabbalah was revealed by folks in the 13th century, but it had already been had by Shimon Bar Yochai, and it had been transmitted all the way back from Moses. So, to be very clear, there are definitely rabbis that believe that, and they believe that the Kabbalah is, at some level, the highest expression of pious Judaism. There are other rabbis that think it's Narishkeit, right? Like nonsense, like paganism. They think it's like Avodah Zarah, right? They think no, like Kabbalah is just worse. It's worse than trash. It's it's an absolute abomination. So, and that's Orthodox. There are Orthodox Haredi rabbis that believe that. So even to this day, Kabbalah is not universally accepted, and many of the rabbis that again Orthodox rabbis that reject it because they think it's a 13th century fraud, right? Now the ones that don't have very complicated reasons why they think it's not a 13th century fraud. I think are pious fraud. I think those arguments ultimately fail. Myself, I think most scholars agree with that. But another sort of meta point about this. This isn't a point. This is a point that the point that Zevi and I made when we were studying Zohar the other day. At some level, for Judaism, it doesn't really matter because canon in Judaism is a much more elastic concept than it is in Christianity at some level, or Islam, and so that it was written in the 13th century doesn't really affect some people's idea that that it cannot be canonical. I accept it as canonical, whatever that means. I don't care anyone cares about my opinion. Um, and so at some level, I think that the idea here is there's two things going on, right? That it is not universally accepted. And a third thing that's going on above those is that even if it is a 13th century text, who cares? It doesn't really matter that it is or isn't. It could certainly be the case that it's a 13th century text and still be canonical. And so that's kind of where I land. Like I don't think it's ancient, but I do think it's an important text. And that's not to say it's not problematic in all kinds of ways. It's a viciously xenophobic text. Those sections are very unpleasant to read, and even more unpleasant to imagine there are people out there that believe that stuff about non-Jewish people. It's hideous, disgustingly racist stuff. But it's in there, and you got to take your tradition for what it is. And so I think again, I think this is imposing a concept of canon primarily coming out of a very Christian, maybe even Protestant idea of what canon should or shouldn't be, onto a religion that doesn't give a damn about that. And so that's kind of what I think ultimately is going on with whether it's a fraud or not. And again, fraud's a weird term. One of the episodes I've been wanting to make is the idea of pious fraud. That even like things like the Book of Mormon, the Enochian stuff from Edward Kelly, the Zohar. I think that fraud is not the right word for what's going on there. I think it's actually a lot more complicated. That we could say, yes, it's not what it says it is. The Book of Mormon is just not an ancient text. It's not an ancient Israelite text, or not a text written, in sort of early North America or whatever. But that doesn't make it less spiritually important at some level. And it doesn't also mean that the phenomenology of having received it or translated it in Joseph Smith case means that it's inherently immoral. That there's something going on interesting there, and there's a kind of ethics about pious fraud that I think is interesting. That it's not merely fraud, and it's not also telling the truth. It's something weirdly in the middle. But that's an episode for another day. Yeah, I don't know. It's an article I want to write, and I'll get to it eventually. The importance of pious fraud. Thank you, Vichus. The impartial formats. This is funny that you mentioned impartial format because one of the things that I get accused of weekly, daily, is being biased against some religion or the other. I'm like constantly being told that I'm biased against Christianity, Judaism. I'm biased against Islam. I'm biased against occultism. Um, it's so fascinating to me that everybody or that many people see me being biased against the thing they believe. And what I think what that reveals is that no one gets a privileged position on this channel. I take Israelite religion with the same grain of salt I take any other religion and treat them to the same analytical, historical analysis that everyone else gets. It doesn't matter that I happen to be downstream of that. And so, yeah, I find it interesting that um, people will often tell me that I'm biased against the things they believe in, which is just interesting because it reveals that I'm biased against. They don't like that stuff being historically analyzed because somehow they think that a vigorous historical analysis undoes the worthiness of it, which is simply untrue. I got interested in esotericism because I just grew up on weird shows like Arthur C. Clarke's Mysterious World and In Search of with Leonard Nimoy, and you know, I when I was a kid, I used to watch that stuff, and I would watch shows about vampires, and I watch horror movies and stuff, and I was just really fascinated by that stuff. Like, could there be a Loch Ness monster? Could there be aliens that have visited the Earth back in the day? Could the religions just be the Von Donigan story or whatever? Um, could ghosts be real, vampires and stuff like that? And it just like fired my imagination as a kid. I was like, just that stuff really fascinated me. I think all kids are kind of fascinated by that stuff. And I think that in life, you end up going of one or two tracks. Either you become skeptical of that stuff and basically lose interest in it, or you only have an interest in it, like in the sense of like watching movies about it, or you drink the Kool-Aid and you start believing in Bigfoot and aliens and um, whatever, ghosts and things. And what happened to me is I became skeptical, but I maintained my interest, and those two things dovetailed in me studying it academically. So I don't believe in any of this stuff. I mean, whatever that means. I don't believe in magic or the power of the occult or whatever outside of people's psychology, I suppose. And but that doesn't mean that I don't take it seriously and try to treat it with academic rigor and understand it sympathetically. Um, again, you can be a Roman historian and you don't have to make sacrifices to Jupiter. I can be a historian of ideas and a historian of Western esotericism without believing in the claims made by these texts. I mean, frankly, you couldn't believe in all this stuff because it's not one coherent story by any stretch of the imagination. People say, "Well, I believe in alchemy." Like, which alchemy? There's like 5 schools of alchemy. They're not reconcilable. They argue with each other. Like, it's like saying, "I believe in Christianity." Which one? Like, pick your team. So that's kind of how I got interested in it. Was again having my interest fired in this stuff as a kid, maintaining that interest, but at the same time maintaining some degree of I don't know, analytical rigor, I suppose. Not that other people don't have analytical rigor and also believe in this stuff. And I think that is absolutely something that I can respect, even if I disagree with. I don't believe that John Dee and Edward Kelly and them were talking to angels or spirits or anything else. But yeah, that doesn't mean that I don't respect and take seriously people's deep belief that maybe they were, and it's worth investigating. All right, drink some water. All right. Neoplatonic Christianity is basically Christian mysticism. Largely. Largely. I mean, there are unique strands of Christian mysticism that are unique to certain areas, like the Theologia Germanica. So there are particular strands of mysticism that are sort of infused with Neoplatonism, but also have their own unique character. Um, think of the Beguines and people like Meister Eckhart. But yeah, I mean, certainly it's the case that the more you lean into the apophatic Neoplatonic emanatory stuff, that tends to be much more mystical the way we would see it. Although a lot of the times I don't like that term, but at any rate, that's um, yeah, that is kind of how it goes. All right, see some other ones. All right. Are there any attacks or references to Hermeticism by the Neoplatonists? That's a great question. Um, how do you think this outlook or attack would or does differ from that of the Gnostics? Um, no, to my knowledge, the Neoplatonists never attack the Hermeticists. I think Iamblichus mentions them. And I think almost always in a positive light. I think that Hermeticism and Neoplatonism are much cozier together. Um, I mean, they have a different theory of salvation. But yeah, it's a bit different theory of salvation with the purifying of the daemons from one's soul, which is very hermetic, um, and escaping fate, which is a very big hermetic idea, as opposed to which is closer to Stoicism actually in some ways, and the notion of contemplation. Although I think they would agree on the idea of reverence, of Eusebia. Like that's an idea they share at some level. Reverence is a big deal for Plotinus as well. But I think that the Hermeticists and the Neoplatonists would have been, kissing cousins, to use a Mississippi phrase. Sometimes you got to go Mississippi or go home. Um, I'm from Mississippi, so I can say things like that. So I think they're much closer to kissing cousins. I think that the attack led by the Neoplatonists against the Hermeticists would be scholastic ultimately. And one of the things that Plotinus doesn't do when he attacks the Gnostics is he never attacks their mythology. He's never going to go in for a dogmatic attack. He's just not interested in that, and no one should. Attacking people at the dogmatic level is just kind of pointless. I mean, they're just going to tell you no, it's not like that, or it is like that. Um, I think that if they're going to attack the Hermeticists, they'd attack them at the fundamental undergirding of their philosophical system. But you'd have to get really in the weeds there. And also, I think the Hermeticists were a tiny little group of people, ultimately. I think Gnosticism was much more popular. When again, Gnosticism was much more popular. Um, so, yeah, I think that their attack would be much more technical. But I think they're so similar in a lot of ways that he doesn't feel the need to go after them. But he knew about them though. But he's from Egypt. He's from Egypt. I'm sure he knew about them. All right. Mm. Wales tonight. There's Welsh words. Oh, the horse skull folk monster. I've seen pictures of that. I don't know any banishing things. Definitely not in Welsh. Uh, my assumption is that in Welsh it'll be a lot of Y's and words, and they'll be like this long. Um, so sorry, I don't have any things to banish it. Um, I will say that no, I guess it's Cornish actually. I'm thinking of. Um, no, sorry, I don't have any magical powers, but I definitely would not want to have to deal with the horse skull folk monster. Good luck. I wish you the best. Godspeed. Um, Welsh is such a cool language. Welsh and Cornish are such cool languages. John Dee was Welsh. Made a big deal of that. Made a really big deal of that. So, um, oh, there's my guy, Philip. Um, yeah, more grist from my mill. Philip also tends to include Islam in the Western intellectual world too. Uh, I'm glad we agree about that, Philip. It's funny that we kind of all hit on the same answer to that question at some level. Um, it's kind of funny. I don't know, but hey, again, if I'm sure folks know Philip from Let's Talk Religion, man, again, one of the best. Him and Let's Talk Religion and Religion for Breakfast are doing absolutely amazing work in terms of religious studies stuff. Absolutely go subscribe to his channel. Wow, I saw a big donation down here. Let me get to it. And oh yeah, Vocatus. Thank you, brother. Thank you, man. The giant donation. Thank you. I really appreciate the support of the channel. And Happy New Year to you. I hope you're doing well. I hope you're doing well. Thank you so much for your support of keeping the lights on and keeping the the Logitech camera rolling. I appreciate it, brother. Thank you. Um, all right. Let's see here. Ooh, a Gnostic Muslim. Thank you for the super chat or the super thanks. Um, man, Gnostic Muslims. There's so many that the whole world of Ismaili stuff and Ismaili alchemy. That world fascinates me. Like, speaking of Let's Talk Religion, Philip just did a great episode on the Ismailis. Um, just absolutely great stuff. I really appreciate what Philip's doing over there. Again, that's sort of our little tiny cadre of people over here, doing religious study stuff. Um, yeah, I really appreciate, just really appreciate all you guys. Um, all right. Oh, I guess I should do some Esoterica show and tell. I always try to do a little bit of Esoterica show and tell to do this. So I'm going to do my best interpretation of Denis Poisson, The Foolish Fish, and do a book recommendation. In fact, he's actually recommended this book too, but I thought I'd double recommend it. Um, uh, Also, Foolish Fish, if you don't subscribe to his channel, also great for esoterica content related to books. This is a set of books that you should have in your library if you're interested in Western esotericism, especially if you're interested in beautiful books about Western esotericism. This is the 2-volume of text Christ, Plato, Hermes Trismegistus. That's a hell of a trinity there. It's funny that Christ comes first and Plato comes afterwards. One could understand one's theology about how one arranges these. But at any rate, what these 2 volumes are, these are published by the Rittmann Library, by the Embassy of the Free Mind in Amsterdam, where I studied. I spent a lot of time when they were on the Bloomstraat. Now they're over at the House met de Hoofden. But what these books are, they are a catalog of all the incunable texts in their collection, at least up to a certain time period. And some of these, I think, may have even been sold from their collection, sadly, beginning for the crisis in 2008. But what this is a catalog of all the books of the incunables. Incunables, for folks who don't do book stuff, incunables are just books printed before 1500. So it's the first 50 years of printing. And what this book is a catalog. If I can find an especially nice looking one. This is a catalog of all the books that the Rittmann Library holds, some pictures of them and descriptions of them and what they're about. Now, why this book is really important, right? You have cool books on all these cool diagrams and stuff. What is this book? It's like a Lillian. No, it's Boethius. Why I think if you're a person interested in Western esotericism, why you should have this book is one big reason, I guess I would say. It's great woodcuts and stuff from these early books of printing. The reason why I think you should have this is because, one, it's inexpensive. It's only $50 for 2 volumes. Second, it's very beautiful. Third, the reason why you should have it is because it's one of the best insights into, if you were interested in esoteric spirituality, right, with a Christian bent, admittedly, because that's how the Rittmann leans. If you're interested in how people in the first 50 years of printing, around the time that the Corpus Hermeticum and Ficino are doing all the amazing stuff, Bruno's around, all that stuff, around that time, if you're interested in that world, this is basically the best 2-volume collection of what people would have been reading. Because printing, as you probably imagine, like anything else, it's a supply and demand market. And so what we're driving people in terms of esotericism related content, this book basically is a catalog of all of the esoterica printed before 1500. That would include Hermes Trismegistus. That would include a whole range of things. And so what's really cool about this is, from a historiographical point of view, rather, is that it's a great glimpse into kind of esoteric hermetic spirituality in the first at sort of the dawn of printing, and at the dawn of the rise of Hermetic or Christian mystical Christianity in that way. So, for instance, this is what's it, third edition? This is the 1493 printing of the Corpus Hermeticum. So this book is really cool. Excuse me. This 2-volume work is really cool because it's basically a catalog of what they were reading, what got printed, what was in the air in terms of what gave rise to the kind of spirituality that ultimately led to esotericism, Western esotericism as we know it. And many of these books are not in print, and many of them are extremely expensive if you were to ever to find them. You're talking some of these books in there are worth $100,000 easy. What we get, if you want to go through and just have a list of all those books, you basically have a reading list for if you were doing, Western esotericism spirituality in 1500, at the dawn of the time period where it would eventually give rise to Ludovico Lazzarelli and John Dee and Guillaume Postel and Johannes Reuchlin and Agrippa and people like Agrippa. If you were living in that world, these were the books they were reading. These were the books they were trying to get access to. And so if you've ever tried to think, what would John Dee have read? What would Agrippa have read? What are the kind of books that were floating around in the libraries, the printed libraries of the European world right around the time they are going to be active? That's your best glimpse into it. And what's cool about it is it's already perfectly curated in 2 beautiful volumes that are, again, $50 for hardcore, but 2 hardcover volumes, super inexpensive. And also supports the Rittmann Library, which is just an absolute cultural treasure. So if you get the chance to go to Amsterdam, you should absolutely see it. I'll put a link in the chat to it if you want to go buy a copy. If you do buy a copy, tell them I sent you. Tell them Justin Sledge from Esoterica sent you. I was just there this summer. So I was talking to the son of Jost Rittmann when we were hanging out and having a great time looking at some of the old books. So you should absolutely check it out if you want to. I think it's been a beautiful text, but also just a absolutely lovely 2-volume book to have. It's really, really great. And again, it's a glimpse into the world of Renaissance esoterica and mystical spirituality. I think that from the printing angle that you otherwise never get to see. So excellent 2-volume book, well worth checking out. And again, sometimes I'll just crack this open and read through it just because I'll always find some book I've never heard of. I'm like, I didn't know he wrote a book like that, or I didn't know that book existed. And I'll go down the rabbit hole of trying to find a copy of it online somewhere, or if there's a translation of it, some of which there aren't translations of. It's absolutely fascinating. So anyway, I always try to give you guys some kind of little show and tell kind of, here's a cool thing you might not know about. Even though folks maybe subscribe to Foolish Fish, maybe you didn't see his episode about it, but it's sort of just a nice little piece of esoterica that is really accessible, that I think is absolutely well worth having on your shelf if you have a $50. I'm not sure how much the shipping is from Amsterdam, but well worth having. All right, let me get a couple more questions. I'm going to go to about 1:40 or about an hour and 40. So get a couple more questions as I wrap up. Was Fulcanelli a fraud? Probably. I don't know why Fulcanelli and those guys get read so much and not other actual historical text of alchemy. I mean, I guess he's a historical text of alchemy now, but it's really a pity that more alchemical texts don't get read, and these kind of 20th century guys get read a whole lot more, and they don't know a ton about historical alchemy actually. So probably. Probably. Thank you, Dan, for the super sticker. I appreciate that. All right. Yeah, the Embassy of the Free Mind in Amsterdam is just a fantastic institution, well worth supporting. All right. This is a great comment. I love a live chat where I can use Latin abbreviations and assume I'm being understood. Yep, you're in the right place. Welcome. Pull up a chair. We'll be pouring whiskey shortly. Is there an English translation of the Treatise of Dragons by Nathan of Gaza? No, there's not. In fact, it's only republished in Gershom Schollem's Be'ikvot Mashiach, in the footsteps of Messiah, and it's only been reprinted just recently. So, excuse me. You can get a copy of it. If you look up my episode about the Treatise of Dragons, I have a link to the Israeli publisher that's reprinted it. So there is a reprint of the Sefer Habaria and the Treatise on the Dragons. But I know there's a guy claiming that he translated the Treatise on the Dragons. It's like $100 on Amazon. No. Don't waste your money. You should go buy other things with your money. Let's see here. A couple more questions. I gotta go get ready for Shabbat. Shabbat comes in early these days, although it's getting later and later, thank God. All right. Let's see here. You guys put so many kind words in the chat. I wish I could throw them up, but I feel like so indulgent by putting up compliments, but I really do. I really do appreciate it. Yeah, I will eventually get to books on the Black Dragon, the Red Dragon. This is a late French grimoires. The reason why part I haven't covered the Dragon Rouge and other stuff like that, at least some of the French ones, is that most of them are written as parodies, and that's also true of the Pseudomonarchia de Manorum of Johann Weyer. It's kind of also written as a parody that got taken real seriously by the writer of the Goetia. But part of the reason why I haven't got to them is they're kind of parodies, and so that's my explanation. But yeah, I should get to them eventually because they did have a big impact. They were widely read. People loved them. Have you any esoteric texts that you've read at any point pushed your boundaries of disbelief? Like disbelieving in the text or actually pushing me to believe in them? If the later, then no, I treat them all with the same rigor of disbelief I treat any other text, I suppose. Have any of them pushed me to possibly believe they're true? I mean, when I was younger, the John D stuff really, when I was reading it for the first time, I was like, oh my God, like this, these angels are talking in language with syntax and grammar. It's weird. What the hell's going on? And that was like that's a, kick in the skepticism. And so, I mean, so much so that I went to Amsterdam when I went there to study. I did all the only thing I've worked on basically the entire time I was there was John D stuff. John D and Okiana, stuff like that. I worked on that stuff tirelessly. And mostly because I wanted to settle my opinion about what I thought happened there. And so that's a text that, or at least when I at first blush, when I was a younger man, strained my ability to disbelieve it because it was so odd in a very particular kind of way. But I've since settled my mind that I think I have a pretty good idea what was going on there. You can read my paper about it if you like. It's published in Journal Aries. I have a link to it somewhere. Thank you for all the work you do and don't do video-wise. Thank you, Jesse. Why are you so awesome? And why don't you know that a black medical star? Yeah. I don't know. I appreciate the compliment. It just struck me that like the amount of people who are metalheads and the amount of people who are interested in esoterica is like, again, it's like a lot of Venn diagrams that approach being a circle. And so I was like, look, if I can do an esoterica style shirt, why not do some esoterica style shirts like black metal style? Just because it would be like self-consciously hilarious. At least I thought it was hilarious. Again, I have to be really careful because my sense of humor doesn't translate well sometimes. And sometimes people find it very irritating, which they're perfectly welcome to find me irritating. But I'm glad it worked. I'm glad you guys are supporting the channel by buying some swag and eating buying some swag and wearing esoterica shirts. I appreciate that. Yeah, feel free to send some pictures of yourselves wearing Esoterica stuff. I'll throw it on the community channel if you want, if you don't mind. It'd be great to have some folks to see some folks in the wild wearing some Esoterica swag. Um, I appreciate you guys. Thank you so much. Um, yeah, I'd like to do this. This would be neat to do a watch along on Dune and talk about some of the mystical stuff, some of the religious stuff going on there, especially with Philip, who's a scholar, a great scholar of Islam. Yeah, that'd be a lot of fun. I love Dune. I love the books. Well, I've only read Dune and Dune Messiah, so I should be careful. I love those two, and and yeah, so maybe that would be a cool idea. I need to do more movie watch-alongs. I've been wanting to do a watch-along on Hereditary for the Goetia stuff, and what was another movie I want to do a watch-along to? It'd be cool to get some me and some other occultists practicing occultists together, like Aaron Leach and or Marco Visconti, who I'm working with on this Bornless one episode, and like watch maybe a dark song or something together and get their commentaries, because I know that I like the movie, for various reasons, and I know that Aaron Leach, who's a really good scholar of the Abramelin, really dislikes it. So it'd be really great to get kind of a critical that's a critical someone who really dislikes its depiction of the ritual there. That'd be cool to do that. He's a super smart guy, and I like hanging out with him. Love talking Enochian shop with him. It's a lot of fun. Only on this weird channel can you say things like talking Enochian shop. My life is so strange. All right. Yeah. Hoxen is also a great one too. That's the one I want to do. Is Hoxen. It'd be great to do that one with Anton Shea, because we both have a deep love of medieval demonology stuff. So it'd be really cool to hang out with Anton Shea and do a watch of Hoxen. That would be a lot of fun. Maybe we could plan to do that this Christmas, or not Christmas, Halloween. um, but or the Ninth Gate would also be I just rewatched that for the first time for in a long time. But yeah, the Ninth Gate will be a fun one. I have the book lined up, and I want to do reread the Club Dumas, considering it's just like all the stuff that it's kind of you know kind of stuff I want to do. But yeah, maybe I can convince some folks to have movie night. That would be a lot of fun. Um, can you please post a link to your paper about D that you referenced? Yeah, I can. I don't know that it's in the public domain, but I can send you a copy if you email me. John D. Etiology. Send you the Brill link. But if you want a copy of it, just shoot me a message via my website, and I can send you a PDF of it. But yeah, basically that's my take on what I think went down with the John D stuff. Thank you for the sticker. But yeah, maybe we can do like movie night, Esoterica movie night. That would be great. Um, Yeah, the Leo Strauss and the Persecution of the Art of Writing. Yeah, I've done some of this with Spinoza, and I talked a little bit about it in my episode of Maimonides. So you may want to check those episodes out on Spinoza and Maimonides, because I do mention it there. Um, so yeah. So the text is not written in French. It's just the abstract had to be written in a language other than English. I don't know why they have. Well, I guess I know why they have that rule. I don't think they still have that rule, um, but yeah, I'll try to find the actual text and publish it online so that folks can have it. But it is I'm pretty proud of it. So I think it's a pretty good article. Um, yeah, I still think it's kind of um, I mean, it gets quoted in John D stuff a lot. So I think people basically agree with it. I don't know. Maybe they don't. All right. All right. Let me scroll back up and get a couple more, and before I have to call it an afternoon. Um, Yeah, Dark Song is a great movie. Folks, I don't know if you how far back you've gone into my content library, but I did a review of a dark song way back at the beginning of the channel. So if you want to know something about what I think about the movie, you can feel free to check that out. Uh, I did a episode on a dark song way back at the beginning of the channel. Um, yeah, it's hard to believe that the channel's been around that long. It will be 3 years come March, so we'll have some kind of birthday party for the channel in March. And it's going to be World Absinthe Day, March 5th. So look for a look for some kind of absinthe content around then too. All right. Make sure I get the super thanks and stuff, because I think I got all of them. Did I miss any? Let me check the chat to make sure I didn't miss any. Okay. Oh, thank you, Jay-Z. I hope you're actually Jay-Z. That would be incredible. That would be great. All right. Let me see. A couple more. King of Galahad, longtime fan of the channel. Appreciate you. Was John Dee's Enochian magic a means of cryptography as a worldly service to? Yeah, no, probably not. I think Queen Elizabeth would have politely asked him to shut that down, because it nearly got him arrested by the Inquisition. The Inquisition was actively trying to lure him into getting arrested. So no, I don't think so. I think that because it wasn't Dee doing it, right? It was Kelly, and in the it is the case that the Queen was interested in Kelly. She did try to have him recalled back to England to basically say what he knew, but no, there's no evidence of any of that. In fact, I mean, people make a big deal of Dee as a mathematician, but he was a pretty crappy cryptographer, to be frank. Um, he was pretty good at math and he was pretty good at like geometry, but there were two codes in his possession that are relatively easy codes to crack, and he didn't crack either one of them. The book of Soiga was generated with a really simple algorithm that he should have been able to figure that out. And there's recently another alchemical code that either it was him or it was Arthur D, his son. I think it was Arthur D that had access to it. Also, it's like polygraphic substitution. It's not super hard to crack. I mean, it would have taken some time, but it wasn't like even like a Visionaire cipher or whatever. But it didn't get cracked. So D was not a terribly good cryptographer, frankly. So no, I don't think that it was wrapped up with John Dee's espionage or alleged espionage. So people like those stories. They're fun, but they often don't come to much. The conspiracy stuff, like, really, I don't know, looms large in people's mind for whatever reason. All right. Couple more. Sorry, folks. I was looking through the chat. Audius Schrobe just purchased Christ, Plato, Hermes Trismegistus. Hey, thanks. Yeah. Like I said, folks, if you do buy it, let the folks know at the Embassy of the Open Mind that I sent you, because I always want to support them, and I'm glad to be able to to do some support of their stuff. And it's a great book. It's well worth you having. Eccentric Tipper, I see your chat. Find a physical copy of Set the Gnosticism Platonic Tradition. I don't know, because I've tried to find it too. It's one of those books that I think is like super important. I bet you're going to have to get it through ILL, Interlibrary Loan. But I can't find a physical copy of it either. It's one of these books that would be great to have, and I'd love to have it, but every time I've seen it anywhere for sale, it's like $1,000 or something. So no, I don't have any. I don't have any good leads there. Where do you buy your alchemical equipment? You mean that there? I got that little distillation uh, rig on eBay. You can get it on eBay for like $40. Um, not sure what alchemy you'll do in there, but be safe, be careful. Don't do it without a fume hood or do it outside. Um, fume hoods are important things. Let me see. I saw another super chat. Um, Another quick note. Noticed on your FAQ that you're into ham radio. Um, uh, uh, so I think I've answered this question another time. Well, this is what I'll say about ham radio. What's cool about ham radio is that if you think about it from the point of view of the harnessing of occult forces, I guess, radio waves are just really cool. I mean, light is really cool, of which radio waves are part of that spectrum. And the idea that you can bundle information into basically an occult force and then shoot it across the world and bounce it off the moon and talk to people, or bounce it up to the International Space Station, it's just really cool to me. And there's something, of course, obviously I can email someone all the way across the world now. So that's not what's really cool about it. It's not talking to people across the world. It's neat. For me, what's neat about it is a really being able to futz around with the technology of communication at that length of space. I can't futz around really so much with the internet cables and the switches and all the things that go on there without getting in a lot of trouble. um, but you can with ham radio really get into deeply understanding how radio communication works and how to harness this amazing hidden force of nature that's all around us. We're saturated in it, and you can harness it and use it for all kinds of cool stuff. So, if you're a technical person and a technical person for whom technology and the history and the application of technology are kind of awe-inspiring to you, and the tinkering with them is a thing that you find awe-inspiring, then absolutely it's worth it. But if you're just trying to talk to people from far away, you can just do that with a computer. So it's not, as a hobby, what's fascinating about it is not the moment you click the receiver and call CQ and someone picks a line up. Um, what's interesting to me is like I can take a I can take a CW tapper, like a Morse code tapper, and I can tap on that, and I can send a message with 2 watts, and it will reach across the world. That's cool. With 2 watts of energy. Like, that's like less than like these light bulbs are using. And I can use that and I can harness it and I can shoot messages all the way across the world. That to me is super cool. So it depends on how you think about your relationship to technology. If you're a Luddite, no. But if you're a person like me for whom technology is kind of an extension of the Renaissance move toward natural magic as simply harnessing occult forces in the world, understanding how those occult forces work, and then harnessing to do neat stuff, I don't know, like Della Porta and Agrippa and people like that, then if you think about it that way, and that's the way I think about it, then the distinction between technology and magic begin to break down. And what you're left with is an awe inspiring ability to grasp occult forces and use them. So that's neat to me. That's really cool to me. But your mileage may vary. Um, all right. You can also see behind me, I have a little crystal radio that I built, which is also cool. Crystal radios are so neat because they don't even need external power supplies. They literally, it's the force of the radio waves themselves push the electrons through the wire. That just blows my mind how cool that is. Just absolutely the neatest thing ever to me. Like you can literally tune in to AM radio, amplified modulated radio, AM radio signals merely by riding the force of the radio waves, through there. So, oops, I clicked the wrong thing, but thank you for that. Yeah, thank you, C, for the for that. Um, what materialist are you? Dialectical materialist. Um, yeah. Also, it's cool because with the I keep pointing the wrong thing. With the crystal radio, it actually has a germanium crystal in there, so it's a really cool thing where you're actually using a crystal not for woo, but for like actual like actually demodulating a signal, which is just really cool to be able to like think like, oh yeah, a germanium crystal can do that. So it's neat to like actually use a crystal in a technological sense. And you see why people think crystals are so cool, because crystals are really cool. You can use a germanium crystal to demodulate an AM signal like that. Yeah, vacuum tube amplifiers are also cool. One of my favorite things, one of my favorite pieces of content that I watch on YouTube are people who are building computers from scratch, like old school computers, and seeing people build computers using vacuum tubes. That stuff is positively mind blowing how cool it is. So I absolutely love watching people like take vacuum tubes and actually build something that can like add numbers. Um, that stuff boggles my mind. I love that stuff. Just like, again, it's like for me, it's just a source of awe. Like using like this kind of older tech, just like for me, it's a place for me where it feels very like spiritual, because it's this deep connection to like material and harnessing these hidden powers in the world to get that material to do stuff for you. And to me, that like and connecting people and that kind of stuff is just it's absolutely fascinating to me. Absolutely fascinating to me. All right, folks. All right. Yeah, of course, and quartz being used for clocks and all kinds of stuff. All right, folks. Well, I think I may start to wrap it up. I've been on here for just about almost 2 hours, just about 9 minute shorts. But again, I just want to always say at the end of these live streams, just in general, how much I just deeply, deeply appreciate all y'all. You guys make this channel possible. You make it fun, which is so important. Like, it can feel pretty isolating. This is one of the things that you'll maybe not know, is that one of the things that we always talk about when it's just sort of us content creators in the back, we talk about how alone we feel often. We're doing so much of the work is sort of one-sided, right? You see the video, but it's really just a thing where in many ways it can feel very isolating. And I will tell you that these live streams are absolutely just like great. Like they help me to feel really connected to you guys. I get feedback and get questions, and they're just really really great to like be able to hang out with you guys and make all this stuff possible. You guys are just again, you make it fun, you make it interesting. Um, you really like make it the kinds of things the kinds of things that make this channel worthwhile. So yeah, thank you guys so much. I really appreciate the community that you guys have started to put together, and how you're making esoterica accessible to people by liking the channel, by subscribing, by my dog barking at someone. Um, yeah, by supporting via Patreon, by buying T-shirts. It sounds so silly to be like I'm hawking T-shirts now, but I like to wear my like the bands that I like. I wear their shirts. And if you're an Esoterica fan, you want to wear an Esoterica shirt, more power to you. Thank you. Again, it helps to keep the lights on and keeps the books coming in. So thank you all absolutely so much for your support of the channel and for hanging out with me. It's really humbling and it means a lot to me, and I really appreciate it. So, all right, everybody. Well, I'm all about taking some Shabbat time, so I'm going to go get ready for some Shabbat time with my family. Take care of yourselves. I hope everyone's having a great start to their new year, and yeah, take a little rest for yourself. You guys everyone deserves a little bit of rest. So find something that you find awe-inspiring, and find something you find awe-inspiring, and maybe make that happen for yourself this weekend. So thank you guys so much again, and I appreciate it. And I'll see you next week for the Akaphalos ritual, the Bornless ritual, some Alistair Crowley, and a few more weeks after that for another live stream. Thank you guys so much, and good Shabbos, Shabbat Shalom for anyone observing the Sabbath. And for everyone else, take care of yourselves. Love yourself. You deserve that. Thank you.